Mark, are you still there?
Yep, I'm ready.
Would you make our motion again today?
I will. I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this ad hoc committee. Meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and any rule conflicting with Governor's Executive Order 16 and 34 permitting electronic meetings be suspended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Well, we'll use Wendell as that second. I saw that, Wendell. Wendell, I also saw you combing your hair. You look beautiful.
I just got out of the shower. It's still wet.
All right. So I will do a roll call for your vote. Please say yes or no to this motion. This roll call will also serve as our attendance roll call. So Elena Boyer.
Yes.
Beth Shen.
Yes.
Charlie Strobel.
Did you hear me?
Nope. Say it again.
Can you hear me?
Say it again. One more time.
Yes.
He said yes. All right. Charlie says yes. Dawn Diener.
Yes.
Freddie O'Connell.
Present and aye.
Ingrid McIntyre.
Yes.
Mark Overlock.
Yes.
Wendell Seagroves. Yes. The motion is unanimous and all committee members are in attendance. So you guys need to know that yesterday that Charlie was actually attending the meeting yesterday. He was on an attendee line and was not able to join us and speak, but he was present for the meeting. So he knows everything that we said yesterday. And now he's with us today. It's nice to see you, Charlie.
I'm happy to be here. Could I give a reaction to yesterday? Since I kept saying hello and nobody heard me. Do you hear me now?
Charlie.
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, well, it seemed like we were outside of your meeting was the fact that we were slighted, mayor's office, and that nobody came to us to ask our opinion. I think that
That
made me think.
Yeah.
It made me think that maybe what we're upset about clear authority and the notions of authority are in there. There's consultative or advisory, and we have always advisor. But when you look at who constitutes the advising group, so many groups that I don't know that we really feel comfortable notions of authority that are being passed around. For instance, there's the mayor's office, then there's Metro Social Services, there's Judy's office, there's the OEM, Planning Commission, there's the council, Metro Council, Public Health Department. All of those are different authorities that sense out of this chaos that we're in. And I thought, recognized that that's probably one of the reasons why we don't feel accepted as a part of any of them. The second thing that might be needed as we develop a letter of the people who are running the fairgrounds. They're on people line, and we don't know how they feel, whether this is a great operation or whether or not it needs improvement. And I think it'd be good. That's about all I need to say right now. There's things to talk about, but I'm glad to be here.
Charlie, thank you very much for all of that. You are still cutting in and out a little bit, but I think we all got the gist of it. So as we get started, my understanding is that we have some guests on our call today that we're going to be hearing from. And the first of those is gentleman from OEM, Judith, is he on the call?
They're working on it right now. I was trying to get on right now.
Okay.
So, you know, as soon as I see him pop up.
Okay. We also have Heather Dillashaw is, I think, with some technical assistance. Is that correct?
Hi, yes, I'm head technical assistance for Nashville.
Well, thank you for being here with us today, Heather. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we will, I know you have some limited time, so we'll hopefully get to you pretty quickly as we move forward. So while we're waiting for the gentleman from OEM, you all received yesterday some information from yesterday's meeting. So let me give you a quick brief. Did you all read the draft of the letter? Yes. Hold on, Ingrid, you're muted. You're muted, Ingrid.
Yes.
This is Elena. Is it possible I can also introduce Barbara DePietro, our Senior
Yes.
Director of Policy? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's what I was raising.
I'm sorry, I did. That was my bad. I missed that. Thank you, Elena, and welcome, Barbara. We appreciate you being here too. Okay, so here's what happened in my crazy mind yesterday after we got off the call. So I started working on an outline for what we wanted our document for the mayor to look like, and it started coming out in more of a form of a what did I want to say to the city about what we've all been talking about. And so what you have in front of you is more of a potential op-ed than it is an actual letter to the mayor. I thought we could potentially use that as information to communicate to the citizenry at large, maybe, and then from that, build our letter to the mayor, if that is acceptable to all of you. That's just kind of the way it came out. I also took some of the notes from yesterday's meeting and put that into a bit of an outline for what we do want to do in terms of sending information to the mayor. One of the things that I want to do, and I want to try to do today, is we've expressed some concerns. We've talked about some of the issues. I want to make sure that we have expressed all of those that we feel like we need to talk about. But I really want to have, by the end of this meeting, a good, clear set of potential recommendations that are clear and concise. We don't need to completely flesh out how each of those things could be operationalized. We simply need to make recommendations and ask for a seat at the table in order to potentially help to operationalize our recommendations. Does all that sound like what we've been working toward? Do I have thoughts, comments, concerns, reactions to the document or to the draft of the letter that I wrote?
Paul, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'll be happy to submit some thoughts.
That was the only question that I have, Paula. I did read it. It was a really strong letter. Wondering, the only questions I have was, one, if we should say a couple things, make a couple of examples that are happening, that are the things that are so egregious. Just wondering. And then the other thing is, I don't know if it would make it even stronger if other people signed it too. Like if anybody from either if this whole task force decided to sign it, or or if people from the rest of the group. Those were just my two thoughts.
Yeah, I think we might need to make, to Ingrid's point, a decision about, do we want to submit an op-ed with Paula and or anybody else, and then which content from that should spill over and also be a part of the letter? Because I think the letter is maybe 3 parts, right? It's sort of preamble and commentary, its recommendations, its concerns, and lingering questions.
Yeah.
This is Dawn. I have a couple of inputs. I thought that the draft op-ed was well done and sort of summarized a lot of what we talked about yesterday and our concerns. But I have a few suggestions related to it. And some of it actually maybe goes to what Charlie started talking about earlier. I guess as I processed through yesterday and I processed through reading these documents, one one of the things that struck me was that it sounded like what we were talking more about, what we were focusing on primarily was this council's exclusion from the conversations. Where I guess what I would like to see us, and I think that's important, but I would rather make that the secondary issue and the primary issue focus on what's happening to the people who are impacted, right? I think that
That's great.
what was the wake-up call for me was waking up to the news that somebody had been arrested for jumping the fence at the fairgrounds. And that sort of was like, well, what the heck is going on there? And how did we get to the point of arresting somebody? And so, you know, to me, I think to me, it's just a matter of shifting a few things around in the draft op-ed that you sent to us that sort of in the second paragraph would just say, you know, we were all naturally kind of cocooned, and then this news story broke and it woke us up. And we all started asking questions about what is really happening. How is this pandemic affecting individuals in our community who don't have homes? And what are the conditions in which they're living? And how is this city treating those individuals? And just a real deep sense of concern to hear about this particular incident, right? And then shift into the, you know, we as the Homelessness Planning Council kind of thought that this was covered, and then we realized that it's really perhaps not being covered, and we were never consulted. And we have a wealth of resources, and our goal is to help ensure that those most impacted by this are treated humanely and well, and as good as we would want anybody in our family to be treated. So that would be the only suggestion that I have for really kind of both a letter to the mayor's office and the op-ed would be just shifting a little bit to place at the center how people who are impacted are being treated and our concerns for them. And that, you know, secondarily to that, I don't think it's not about us being excluded. It's like if we had been excluded and they were doing this really well, great, right? But I think the primary concern is, are they really doing it well? And if they're not doing it well, then the fact that they excluded us from the conversation means they're not taking advantage of a real resource that exists. And so that's what I would say. I think it's just a slight tweaking of what you've got here. This is a really good, solid base.
Okay. Couple.
May I add to that?
Hold on. Wait, Charlie. I need to get to Mark, and then Beth, and then Ingrid, then Charlie. Mark.
Thanks. So just following up on Charlie's comments, and then Dawn, you had some good comments as well. When I read the materials, my first reaction was, wow, Paula, you've really sort of said what we're all feeling. And I'm wondering if I need to follow my mother, Sally Overlock's advice, which is, you know, write that letter the night before, then sleep on it, and then tweak it the next day. So it's one thing to be right, but it's better to be effective. So if we can avoid, and I think, Charlie, you were trying to say this in some ways, avoid sort of calling people out. Because if you put if you walk in the shoes of the mayor or any of his staff or anybody else that's trying to solve this problem, they're doing the best they know how. And unfortunately, we bring a bunch of expertise to the table from a wide variety of resources and resource agencies and people with a lot of experience. And that's the voices that are missing. So what can we offer the people that are frankly trying to fix the problem? As Dawn said, they're just not doing well. So that they have additional resources and insights that they otherwise wouldn't. How can we bring that to the table? That's how I'd say either the op-ed or even the letter to the mayor.
Okay. Beth?
So my comments are sort of echoing those, that the central point isn't that we're miffed, which we are, and justifiably so, but that bad things are happening. So I might even lead with that person being arrested, and then talk about the expertise that we bring to the table, as well as our supposed legal authority. So our council includes people with lived experience of being homeless, and what includes a lot of expertise from service providers and from others. And then to the extent that today we come up with real recommendations to try to fit those into a letter as well in short form. So the focus is what's going badly. Here we have expertise that's been shut out. Here are some recommendations on the basis of that expertise.
Okay. Ingrid and then Charlie.
Yeah, excuse me, this may not, yes to everything everyone has said. I would just hate for us to say that, Dawn, I agree with everything you said, except for the part about like the wake up call, because there have been advocates advocating for better treatment since the very first day that this started. And I would hate for anyone to think that all of a sudden somebody got arrested and we were paying attention. No, somebody got arrested and our heads exploded, but we have been paying attention. So I just want to make sure that that is not, there have been questions and suggestions since the first day that this started. That's all.
So Charlie, would you do me a favor and let me come back to you? We have Jay Cervas, I think is the way you say it, close enough, right, Jay? From OEM with us. And I know that we all have some questions related to OEM and the process and things that have happened. So Jay is here to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on at the fairgrounds. And I guess, Jay, if you could maybe start with telling us a little bit about, you know, we haven't been part of the conversation, so we are coming at this from a place where we don't know. And so the question that we want to ask, first of all, is how did the fairgrounds operation begin? Where did it come from? And tell us a little bit about what's going on out there, because I know that that's, you guys have kind of been the ones to set that up.
Yes, ma'am. And first off, thanks for inviting me to the meeting, and sorry for my tardiness. I was at, we're giving away masks now on Fridays and Saturdays. I had to make sure they were set up, so I apologize for being a little late. But so where this started from was on March 3rd, we had a tornado, as you all well know, and we had set up emergency sheltering for the homeless community. Red Cross had aided us in that, and then they bail. They bail after 2 weeks, especially once it becomes a homeless shelter. They're out because they don't do homeless shelters. They do emergency sheltering for the community. So, okay, so that relaxed. And during that time, we had to start looking for facilities because we were getting word that the COVID was down south and moving this way. So we started to try to plan for that, or plan for those that were, you know, displaced, like the folks that had homes but became homeless, right? Needed sheltering also until they could get on their feet. So we had to start looking at those options because that was at Centennial Sportsplex, and we knew that space needed to be freed up for normal activity. So the fairgrounds, we looked at it as a sheltering option and landed it, and it was a good use of space. It's 100,000 square feet, and we was like, let's do it. So then COVID jumped in and reared its ugly head and made us all do backflips and all this kind of stuff. And we had public health come out and inspect it so that it would meet CDC guidelines. And once they signed off on it, then we started operating out of there as an emergency shelter for homeless community, those experiencing homelessness. So my background, for those that don't know, is I was brought up by a nonprofit. Father, Mike Survey, who ran the Salvation Army for years and years and years. And so I knew a little bit going in, but I grew up with a passion to help those that are in need, whether homeless or in need. So many Friday nights under the Jefferson Street Bridge serving tea to people I was very uncomfortable around as a child. So I learned how to do that. So passion was there, so we set it up. Sorry, I'm getting emotional.
That's appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, we set up the fairgrounds as quickly as we could, and we set it up so that we could have the mission and I got together and we said, hey, Glenn and Norm and those guys got together and we said, hey, the mission can't handle the load of people that we have because we can't stay within our CDC guidelines, meaning 6 feet apart, social distancing to keep people safe. So we took on that role to help relieve that stress off of them at the fairgrounds. We were able to do that. So we set up a well side and we set up a sick side. The well side is 35,000 square feet. And they are all distanced between 6 and 10 feet apart from each other. And we have them in corrals of people so that they keep their distancing, and we can encourage them to keep that distance between each other. And then on the sick side, which is 46,000 square feet, we have those PUIs, which is person under investigation, which is those that are waiting for test results or waiting to be tested, that are either asymptomatic or symptomatic. And then we have the sick division of that within those boundaries. But they are separated on different ends of the building, if that makes sense. 46,000 square feet is huge area. All right, so I then have public health come back out and reestablish that we are staying within the guidelines, and they signed off on it yet again, saying it was a great facility. It meets all the CDC guidelines and all that. So that's the history. We have only had 2 positives pop out of that shelter. The other positives that have happened, like today, is I think, now, so don't quote me on this one, but my phone's on the other side of the room. I think we're at 130 well, 10 positives, and 30 to 35 PUIs, like waiting for test results. And so the numbers are staying quite strong in the sense of handling the illness and keeping people distanced. We did have one episode 2 or 3 weeks ago with the mission, and I took all their sick on. So we had to do a mass testing. We ended up getting about 20 cases there that we had just brought in the day before from the mission, and then I took on 100 or 120 from the mission that were sick, and we were able to do that because we had that facility and the staffing, to manage that. And then after 7 days and no fevers, a lot of that was released. So they were clinically well, as far as the term goes. So that's kind of the history on that. So I will tell you a little bit about the wraparounds, because I've been educated since taking on this, because OEM's not normally in the homeless sheltering business. We do help with the cold weather shelter that we have during the winters when it gets below 28 degrees and all that. We help logistically with that, but we've taken this on. So my point being is the wraparounds was very educational for me. The food, Second Harvest Food Bank is on board. They feed them 3 times a day. Kim is my contact out there, and they have totally gotten on board and feeding 3 times a day with snacks. And they have a cantina kind of set up there for them to go in and grab bottled waters or drinks and things all day long. And they do that and staying distant. So it's pretty neat. So anybody that wants to come down and visit or tour, and please feel free to do that. I know that I think I had one today, I think, that's coming at 10. Is it at 10? But anyway, we're going to tour it. But I had 2 council people come down so far, and their minds, I mean, there's still concerns. We're always going to have concerns, but that they were highly impressed with the operation. Once they came, they said, we're glad we came. We see how you got it going on. So for example, things you might not have heard of. We have exercise classes for them weekly, right? We have somebody come in, volunteers their time, and we have a courtyard there, and we spread them apart 10 feet apart, and they're able to exercise. Or movie nights, and then big screen TVs. We have basically a laundry mat set up there now for them to do their own clothes. And then Room at the Inn has volunteered on Mondays and Thursdays. They wash all the linen throughout the place. So we take dirty, they give us clean, and we're able to swap out there. Like I said, the food, the entertainment, and then the sick isolation. So the sick are isolated. within the CDC guidelines there. There's always room for improvement. I know that, and I'm never a person that doesn't listen for suggestions to better an operation. So please feel free to jump in and help that. So I'll open it up for questions, but there's the history. There's what we got going on. We have had up to 275 people there. And when the mission gets in trouble, we go in and we rescue that, that effort. Sorry, my phone's ringing in the background. It's probably, is it Rachel? Tell her I'll call her back. We got, that's another mass question, sorry. And then we got the assessment centers going too, so I apologize. It's trying to handle business.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, go for it. Hit me with some questions so I can quit rambling.
All right. Who would like to ask a first question? Give me a hand.
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, Charlie.
Okay. Well, I knew your dad quite well. We went down the Ocoee together and capsized our raft. And each of us claimed to save the other person's life. So he's a wonderful man, and you have a great father figure.
Yeah.
My question, first of all, could you repeat those first facts that you gave of because you're developing the profile that we're concerned about.
Okay.
It sounded like there were 3 different groups.
There are, Charlie, Father Strobel, there are. And I heard you like peanut butter sandwiches. So is that rumor true?
Yes.
Is that how this started, sir? I was told a rumor is that, yeah, a peanut butter sandwich started all this. Okay.
Well, not really, but
yeah, I know. Okay.
right.
We have 3 different sections. So in one building, 35,000 square feet, right, is the well side, is what we call it, the well building. That's where they're just experiencing homeless. They're not symptomatic. They don't. They're just being housed, right?
Right.
And fed and showers and all kinds of good things going on there.
How many of those?
So today, I believe there's 135, Charlie.
Okay.
Well, I got it.
Charlie, we have the numbers that
Okay.
Ingrid sent out. Ingrid, you sent that out to everybody? Sorry, not Ingrid, Judy.
Yes, everybody has those numbers.
Yeah, you should have that in an email that gives the breakdown per day of
Well, yeah, but just for example, today is 133 well. We have 10 COVID positive and 28 persons of under investigation. So those are the 3 different classifications that we're carrying there at our system in 3 different areas.
What's your major obstacle and difficulty in running this?
Staffing.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so who provides the staffing?
Okay, so staffing is provided by social services and a temporary agency that we got on contract. So we have 2 temporary agencies on contract. One was already on contract called Delta T, and a new one that just came on board is Millennium. Those are both staffing agencies. I've had to reach into there because of the medical support that I'm trying to provide because of my background and what I do for a living. I know that there are different levels of medical training to provide a service for a person. So somebody may be need higher level medical care. So I try to have that there. So social services is managing it for me. Renee Pratt and her team, a young man named Marcel is handling that day-to-day operations for us and is knocking it out of the park. I have to put the reins on him because he gets fired up about it. So I have to hold him back sometimes, but he's very passionate he's a social worker by trade, so he cares about the human spirit. So I got the right guy in the right place there. And then another guy named Robert, they share that load. So, but then the rest of that is the temporary agencies, and then St. Thomas, we have them on contract also. So they're providing the emergency, medical support. I'm gonna put that on vibrate. I'm gonna learn my lesson. There we go. To help with transport. So if St. Thomas or Vanderbilt or HCA or any of our local hospitals call us with a person experiencing homelessness that's COVID positive, then I have the ability to go, I've contracted that ability to go pick them up and bring them back to our shelter. And then also in the beginning of this, we were bringing on 50 a week. Well, at first 100 a week from the mission, but now we've got it on at 50 a week on Thursdays. And St. Thomas will go over and do a medical screening on these folks that we are taking in, so that we try to avoid bringing in any, I call them hots, just as a field term, because I don't want them hot when I bring them in. I want them just asymptomatic without COVID, symptoms. So I don't have a breakout in the shelter. So St. Thomas, 2 temporary agencies and social services are staffing it. The challenge is this: when we popped hot that one time, Renee lost half her staff to quarantine, right? That's at the shelter. So then you're in some kind of weird dilemma with staffing and having 200 people that you're taking care of. But that's where the temporary agency moves in. Now we've gotten smart, and she keeps half her staff back doing daily social services work. And then Marcel and his team work in the shelter. And if we do have that occurrence happen again, then it's just a rotate of the management staff, and then the temporary agencies providing that. But even the temporary agencies, Charlie and group, they're a great asset to have, but they're not the most reliable, if that makes sense. You can ask for example, I need 4 medical assistants for 3rd shift on Thursday. Well, they'll say, okay, and then 1 shows up, and it doesn't click real well. And that's the challenge, is staffing. So I approached Big Metro, is what I call it, because I'm still a peon in the big system. But with hiring 104 people, and they gave me the green light. So this is brand new information that I have for you today, that we're going to be able to hire seasonal type employees to help me run the shelter. And as we grow or as we expand, I'll be able to meet the need of the staffing side.
If there's a need, a problem of non-compliance, who handles that at bottom line?
So
who takes over and takes charge of that situation? Let's say of violence.
Okay, so if it makes it up to me, somebody's probably getting some kind of disciplinary action, Charlie. So Marcel handles that. But thank you, because now you got my mind rolling. We also have security there. Metro Parks Police handle the exterior, and Rock Solid Security, which is the company that works with the mission for their security. I got them on contract also, an emergency contract, to provide that service, because they know most of the residents by name. So they handle the inside security. They do the interior security of the facility. So Marcel handles most of that at a low level, social work level. So the rest deal that happened, it was abrasive for a lot of people, but and I want to hear your concerns on that, because I really want to hear those, because I want to know that. But so there's a policy there that was set forth by Dr. Bailey of 2 warnings, and then they're detained, especially if they're quarantined. If they have a quarantine letter, which means they are basically considered sick, whether they're hot or waiting for that result to be hot, they're quarantined to the facility. They're not restrained. They're not anything like that. But if they leave the facility, then they are apt to be under the law at that point, because they're weaponized, especially if they're hot and they're going back to a encampment. They escape the shelter, right? Basically is what they're saying. But we don't hold anybody against their will unless they're quarantined. If they're quarantined, we highly suggest that they stay in the facility so they don't
suggest they were arrested.
Okay, so I do have to ask that question. What is the difference between highly suggest they stay in the shelter and arresting them when they leave?
Well,
because that's 2 different things. Highly suggesting means it's highly suggested, but you're not forcing them. But if they get arrested when they leave, clearly that's being forced to stay. And
yes.
and
So
tell me what they sign when they signed something? We
Yes.
were under this, that
Yeah, their
tells them that they are
quarantine letter.
being,
A quarantine, they sign, so when they come to the facility and they're quarantined, Dr. Caldwell and team have a quarantine letter. Oh, I'm getting told, hold on just a second. Hold on just a second.
okay.
Yeah.
While he's off,
I'm back. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right.
We had a problem at one of my facilities at the mask handout. We got a traffic issue. Sorry. Yeah, call PD on that, Heidi, and have them come out with that. So I have an email somewhere that I'll be glad to send somebody from Dr. Bailey that defines that. You know, you get a warning, a verbal warning. You get 2 verbal warnings, and then you're detained within the facility. But if you try to escape, then you're up to law. So what I heard, and I don't have proof of this one, guys, in my hand, but Parks took their level of enforcement to Metro Legal to find out what was truly legal and not, you know, what was their level. And they found out that they could arrest if they were quarantined letter, that they could be arrested if they left the facility. That's
Quarantine letter, is this quarantine letter read to each person that comes
Yes.
into the building? It's read to each human
Yes,
that comes in.
and they sign it.
I'm not as surprised by the arrest, honestly, Chief Gervais. I think one of the concerns I had was actually the decision to continue forward with pressing charges. It seems like the interest here would ultimately be about public health and not about a punitive initiative. So I don't know, how was the decision to press charges carried through it?
Yeah, you're so way above my pay grade, Councilman O'Connell, on that one. And I don't know the answer on that one because that's outside of my scope. If that makes
Freddie,
sense. I don't want
Freddie, I think that's a DA question, honestly.
Because I
think Dr. Caldwell got involved in that personally, though, Paula, which is the reason I'm pressing on it.
right.
Okay.
So they'll call me for advice on things, and on that, Marcel is an expert at talking of people down from a high, like a sense of rage or something within the shelter. You know, you're taken away, but we're not, and he'll talk them down, and normally he can keep them within. But so to me, in my experience, if you are positive, you are COVID positive, you're supposed to quarantine. You're not supposed to be around your family, right? So you're a weapon, you know. And if you go back to an encampment and you're not staying within
Could we please not refer to human beings as weapons?
Yeah, thanks.
well,
Sorry. I understand what you're saying, Jay, but again, you're talking to folks who are, you know, very sensitive to language and labeling. So please.
I'm not calling the person a weapon. I'm calling COVID a weapon.
I understand that.
But I'll change that terminology because
I appreciate that.
Right. And understand my 30 years of military background, so I apologize for that.
That's okay.
It's harmful to our folks when they hear that. So it just helps to escalate, and then Marcel has to de-escalate. So language like that can just be harmful.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the advice.
No, I appreciate you listening. I know this is a time sensitive kind of thing, and we got a lot of stuff, and I know there's a lot of questions. And I want to make sure that we're getting to everyone who needs to ask a question. So are there other things specifically that we need to ask from Chief Service?
Someone declines to sign the letter.
If someone we don't force them out, but we keep them and we love them. We try to get them to stay within, you know, the boundaries. But we haven't held anybody against their will. Most of the time, we're able to talk them down through Marcel or Park Police or security to explain it to them in detail. And most of the time, 90% of the time, they understand. But that one case decided to run, you know, and that was heartbreaking to me. But you know, I don't know about, yeah.
This is Dawn. I mean, I think you have to really examine a statement of we're not holding anybody against their will when in fact what everybody there saw and knows about is the fact that when somebody left, when he was told not to, he was arrested and jailed for over a week. And so I think that as you really reflect on what it means to hold somebody there against their will or not against their will, you have to sort of think about what choices individuals have and what kind of free will they truly have if what they understand the consequence of leaving to be is to be jailed.
Yeah, and also that's a very good point, Dawn. The other piece that I think we all have expressed, Jay, is that so these folks are being tested and they're positive, and so they're read this letter and they sign this letter and they're told they have to stay here, and literally if they leave they could be jailed. The difference for them is that you've got thousands of other people who've tested positive in this city, and none of them are being jailed if they walk outside their house. And so I think for us it's the how do we reconcile the differences in the way that people are being treated. And I have no doubt, let me just say this very clearly, that the Metro Social Services staff and you guys are literally you're doing the best you can, and you've set up a system in the best way that you knew how to do, and you've done that well. Our issue is that we have a lot of other ideas of about how things could have happened, yet we haven't been able to provide those because we haven't had a seat at the table. And so that is where a lot of our concerns are coming. So, right. Freddie, I know you have a lot of questions, Freddie. And again, I want to give Chief Servais just a little bit more time because we're going to run out of time, and there's some stuff that we need to get done. So, Freddie,
let's ask questions. I'm good.
Yeah. Go ahead, Freddie.
Well, Chief Servais, and I know people here have awareness. You've been thrown in, obviously, to like a lot of us have to dealing with something that nobody could have predicted, that is requiring a lot of calling of audibles. As we kind of think through the distinctions between how you're kind of managing the population that is out there, how are you identifying PUIs right now?
How are we? So symptomatic. So every day, people are medically screened twice a day by St. Thomas staff. And that's another reason why I'm trying to bring on some higher level staffing, also medical staffing too, through the temporary agency for that. So symptomatic, we all have a list of symptoms that are showing to be, that are known for COVID. We also do the medical screening. So temperature checks, pulse, blood pressure, twice a day by that staff. If someone meets the criteria that is the known symptoms, then we move them and have them to the PUI section and have them tested.
Is there any kind of pre-screening? Like if you come in, you have because of, I guess one of the concerns I've had is, I think how some of the clustering has occurred is there is still such a risk of asymptomatic spread. Are we doing anything to kind of mitigate that?
Well, we're doing, as we check people in, whether it's, we were getting bus loads or several bus loads, let me be careful with my terminology, of people from the mission, and they would be screened at the mission and then screened again just to make sure before we did the intake process. And then part of that intake process again is, the temperature checks. Now, every day on the well side now, if they're not under quarantine on the well side, they're given, if they have a job, they've given a day pass to go to work, and they come back. When they come back, they're pre-screened again, temperature checks and signs and symptoms questionnaire by the medical staff. The people that don't have jobs, they're given normally 2-hour passes, and we'll let them go and handle their business, whatever that might be. And then they're checked back in. And then also, Freddie, I don't know if y'all know this part, but we have 2 vans there, 2 15-passenger vans, and we do daily runs with those that have needs from Walmart or need to go to the drugstore or go pay bills. We have that ability to transport them around with social services. And then we also have laptops and computers there for people that need to handle business that way. So On the well side, it runs like a normal shelter would every day. We tried to mirror the mission as much as we could on
And so
that.
speaking on the check-in front and kind of that how people are coming and going, is the fairgrounds operation working with our local coordinated entry and HMIS processes?
I do believe so. I'll double check on that, Freddie, and get very clear clarification for you, sir.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And this is again a curiosity that I know when I had talked to the administration going back weeks now, this was before CARES Act and all of that. I know one of the reasons, and you've spoken to this in terms of staffing being a major obstacle and that having a clear linkage to funding. But with CARES Act money, has there been any discussion yet about using hotels or other facilities to offer better isolation?
And to answer that, yes. Now, yes, there has been that discussion. And I'll tell you, I reached out to 2 hotels and they were all good to go with people experiencing homelessness. But as soon as you said COVID positive, I couldn't get them to answer the phone anymore. But that's just one case, okay? The second thing is safety, in my opinion, and safety of those folks with you don't know anybody's history, right? So we can't, safety is a major deal with the hotel rooms, is what I'm gonna say there. I can't keep eyes on a large population if they're in individual rooms, if that makes sense. With the setup we have now.
Why do you need to keep eyes on them? Why do you need to keep eyes on them?
To encourage social distancing, to encourage mask wearing, and to see if they're being ill.
Okay, but anybody with a home does not have that kind of keeping of eyes on them, correct?
I can manage the shelter easier with less staff in an open bay policy. How about that?
You need a shelter if people are in individual rooms. They're grown adults and they can stay in a hotel room on their own.
How are you going to staff it?
Why do you need to staff someone? Nobody needs to be in a room with a grown adult in a hotel room.
Are you got to do medical?
Like me, they're 44 years old and they can go into a hotel room on their own.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the issue. Wait, Dr. Chief. I think the issue for us is that if you there's an assumption being made that if you don't have a home, you can't take care of yourself, but that's kind of what it sounds like, is that everyone who has a home who tests positive is given a quarantine letter or whatever and told, go to your house and stay there for 14 days. There's no security, there's no police officers, there's nobody outside their home 24/7 making sure they don't step outside their home. Right. And they do that. So why are we treating folks without a home like differently? Because we don't think that they could go to a hotel room and stay in the hotel room for 14 days like they're supposed to. We're assuming that they won't do that.
The one thing I do know is a person experiencing homelessness can take care of themselves. They know how to do it better than most people in America. They know how to survive and take care of themselves.
So what's the problem?
So the problem is, how do you feed them? How do you provide the medical support? How do you provide the entertainment? How do you provide all those things that we're providing at the shelter for them in a group setting? How do I do that in each individual hotel room? Does that, I mean, like, I've got to send around a medical crew to each hotel room, and then I got to send around the food to each hotel room. Logistics.
It works really well. We've done it before, and it works really well in other situations, like so much better.
So I think Chief, this is exactly what some of our point has been in forming this task group from the Planning Council, is that those are all questions and issues logistically that this group of experts could have helped with and figured out ways to make those things happen. We haven't been given the opportunity to do that. So, and this is why we have all these questions. And again, let me say very clearly, I don't want you to feel like any of us are attacking what you're doing. This is an unprecedented time, and we know that. We may not agree with the way that things have been done, but we know that you guys are doing a good job with what you have available. Right. We want to be available to help make it better. Yeah. So
I'm not taking anything personal. We're just hustling and trying to take care of people. And if there's a better way to do that, then let's do it. By God, let's get on board and knock it out. But right now, for the number of people, especially when we have those spikes of people, it's so much easier to take care of several people in that facility that we have right now if I don't know how to say that, I'm not well versed, fluent in that, but I know that I can take care of a lot of people when those spikes happen. When we do that intake from the mission and it's 100 people, I know that I can put them in on the 6th side there, and with 4 or 5 people, I can handle that whole workload within hours, right? And give them the care that they deserve at that point, and never feel isolated or alone,
Okay, Ingrid, I'm gonna go to Elena next, and then Ingrid.
Hi, Jay. Thank you for being with us today. My question is related to coming from a national organization. Who informed, or where did you go to inform what you were doing now? And, what kind of due diligence did you do when setting that up? Are there other peer cities that you saw that were responding to outbreaks and shelters that were doing it well that you saw it in?
No, I went straight from emergency shelter to homeless shelter in that time frame, from tornado to COVID. But we have, from the mayor's office, they have researched that, and other cities are doing it. But I know other cities are doing hotel rooms, so I know that I'm living in that education. I'm trying to educate it and make it happen every day. But right now, the system's working. I mean, we've had 2 positive.
The system isn't working.
I don't know if it's working, but and I'm just wondering if there's some best practices and promising practice out there which this group is informed to do. I'm just wondering, and it doesn't sound like there was consultation maybe prior to setting that up to better inform that from other places. So I think you answered my question.
Public health was our lead agency on saying that it met CDC guidelines. That I never made a decision on that. I only followed those orders.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions that we need to have answered? Ingrid?
I mean, well, and also Barbara did have her hand held up for a long time. But what I want to know just really quickly is, so normally also when we're talking about hotels, Launchpad has been doing hotels for weeks and has been, giving folks food and providing healthcare, et cetera. And also mostly the folks that need to be quarantined, like you said, it's a pretty low number, right? So it's not like 400 people need to be in a hotel room. It's more like, I'm not looking at the numbers right now. I have it on my computer, but it's like, 20 people, 50 people. Like, it's not the entire population, the entire homeless community of Nashville that needs to be in a hotel. It's like 20 to 50 people is
38 today.
One thing. Yeah, and it's just like, it's been done. Launchpad is doing it. Like other community groups are doing it so that folks. So that's one thing. But then my other question is, when you say sections, do you mean separate buildings, or are they all sharing the same air filtration system?
No, the well side is totally separate from the other side. So 40, the other side, the PUI and the 6 side is the same building, but it's 46,000 square feet. So they're on different ends of the building. So you'll see that. Well, I'm meeting somebody out there today. I don't know who it is. Okay, it's Dawn. Okay. Yeah, I'm meeting Dawn out there. She'll see what we got going on today and better report that to you. But hey, Ingrid, and I'm not challenging you. I'm educating myself. Who are you talking about providing the rooms for specifically?
I'm talking about providing people Launchpad has already done that, but I'm talking about providing people who are whatever you call them, people who are awaiting test results and people who are in actual quarantine. Because from what I understand is that it's a very painful thing. And if you're in a room with 25 other people during this like really awful experience, that's probably not the best experience you could have. But I'm just saying, hotel rooms for people to be able to quarantine at the least, right? At the very minimum. I mean, I would love it for everyone, but it seems to me with the money that's being spent on new staff people and new, all the stuff, it's like, great. We have universities that are not being used right now. We have hotels that are being used right now. I get people in hotels all the time, that I think we also have relationships with people who own hotels. So like, let's talk to them.
Right. And so the harder cases that you're referring to, the painful ones, those are the people I try to find those hotel rooms for. We've used hotel rooms. So we have not used hotel rooms. It's just when I come at them with a number of positives, I can't get them back on the phone, Ingrid. I'm telling you, they won't answer the phone. But we have. So
Cool, reach out. I would love to help.
let's go with the single mom that was COVID positive, and her son was in a wheelchair full time. I had to have a hotel room for them. I was not going to put them in a shelter. Okay, and then the other example, just to be devil's advocate, just to talk. So in that forum that I've got now, if someone is experiencing that kind of pain, then I've got St. Thomas there to transport them to the hospital to get them the care they need. Right? How do I know if they're having that pain in a hotel room? You do wellness checks apparently in a hotel room, right? Just like we do after the tornado, we went door to door everywhere, right? And did wellness checks. I guess that's kind of the system you would use there.
Well, it is. We're doing right now just in encampments as we're handing out food. Like there's outreach workers in the town that do that. Sorry, go ahead, Paula.
No, that's okay. I'm trying to be mindful of time at this point, and we're winding down. And I know we have Barbara. Barbara, I'm not going to say your last name because I can't without butchering it. But Barbara is with National Healthcare for the Homeless, and I think has some input that she wants to share with us. Would you please go ahead, Barbara?
Oh, thanks so much for having me be here today. And as many of you know, I'm a colleague of Elena's, so I appreciate her pulling me into this. Jay, I really appreciate like all of the services that you've outlined here. You've just done a tremendous kind of assessment of all the things that you've put in place. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question on some of the services you described. In particular, I was curious, for everyone who's at the facility, whether they're COVID involved in terms of screening positive or testing positive or others, I'm just trying to get a sense of the medical and behavioral health services that are available. And I guess like very specifically, how are people continuing to get their insulin, their blood pressure medications, like the medications that they're on? How are they getting their behavioral health? And I don't mean this from a responding to emergent or urgent issues. I mean just kind of from a continuity of care. People coming into this facility had a lot of just chronic medical and behavioral health conditions to begin with, many of them likely on between 3 and 10 medications each. Who's managing the medications and the ongoing care? And the reason, part of the reason I ask about this is because so many medical conditions and behavioral health conditions obviously are going to be very responsive or impacted by stress, the environment, everything that's going around them. And I'm just concerned about the disruption to the continuity of care. And then when people are not medically on their medications and all of that, you can see why tensions or behaviors would start to change in a way that made your job a little harder. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, I know you talked about the staffing and that being an issue. I'm just trying to get a sense of like how comprehensive the medical care is to include mental health and addiction services.
Right, and that was a concern going in because Glenn and Norm had briefed me up from the mission on those type of issues that they'll have at their facility. So social workers are trained in some behavioral things or attributes, right? But what we have is we have St. Thomas there at medical support to help hand out medications. We have all the insulin and all those things. They're helped with that through St. Thomas at the facility. If a need for a doctor's appointment or things like that come up, we have the vans that we will take them to their appointment, or we get them a free bus pass to transport, which there's a bus stop right outside the fairgrounds there, and they make their appointment and then they come back. So that's what the use of that 2-hour pass is. That 2-hour pass is, it can be 3 hours, just depends on what the need is that they need to go out for. So there is continuity of care there. If it becomes larger than what my facility can handle, then we send them to the hospital. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question, I mean?
Yes.
It does. I'm just concerned about the negative health outcomes. Just again, all of this is so incredibly disruptive for everyone, particularly this population. And then I guess a second question, while we have, this was referenced earlier about the CARES Act funding and the federal resources coming to localities. What's the view from your perspective and the decisions and conversations you are present for on how those new resources are being put in place for more permanent solutions to homelessness? Like how to change the entryway into housing, the amount of housing that you have. I guess one of the things I'm just hearing is so much of this is temporary for while we're in the worst of a response. But how can we be using, or what's the plan that you're seeing being put in place for the longer term use of those resources that can be focused on more permanent housing and those solutions?
So those meetings have started because we are moving from a response standpoint to more of a planning standpoint now that we're starting to get our hands around COVID a little bit. I don't think anybody's 100% there yet. But the talks are happening about long-range sheltering options for those experiencing homelessness, right?
So, Jay, if you said that right now, who's talking? Who's in those meetings?
I'll find out more next week because they are on me about being at a meeting Tuesday and then a follow-up meeting on Thursday. And so the mayor's office is generating these meetings.
The mayor's office doesn't do HMIS and housing for the homeless community in this town.
The talks are starting. Is when the meeting is starting.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
You might let them know that they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's okay. I mean, that's good. That's good information. I'll let them know.
So one of the things that I want to make sure you hear us saying, Jay, is that I have a tremendous amount of respect for every nonprofit and organization that does this work. I think they're all absolutely amazing. But you need to, I hope that the mayor's office would consider calling on the expertise of not just single or individual entities, but this council as a whole, who's been dealing with this issue using providers as well as people with lived experience, for years. And we have a wealth of information and resources that we could bring to the table if we were invited to the table. And again, that's clearly one of our biggest frustrations is that we haven't been a part of any of the planning process. I'm not sure that we could have come up with a better idea and a better way to do things had we been at the table. However, we just want to make sure that the voice of our expertise is being involved with the planning.
Right. And yeah, like I said, I'll take educated advice from you guys any day. This council, you guys, that was very you folks. How about that? That's a Southern term, folks. But because we went into it blind and just trying to provide somewhere to sleep for somebody that was experiencing homelessness, right?
No, I understand.
And to give them some care and some love and some food and soups for souls is what my daddy used to say, right? So that's where we went. So if it's time to grow, then it's time to grow, and let's make that happen.
So again, in being mindful of time, does anyone else have a pressing question that we need answered by Chief Suarez before we try to move on into the rest of our business?
I have just one sort of logistical question.
Yes.
I've heard you describe the different how the shelter is organized. Are men and women housed separately? And then how are you dealing with individuals who, if that's the case, how are you dealing with transgender individuals?
Right. So social services turns no human down, period. Right. So they are human beings, period. No matter what their preference, what their practice, whatever it might be, no one is turned down. So women it is a co-ed area, but the women are separated from the men. I hate using corrals, but they're separated because we have them separated in corrals. That's how we manage the system. So, or let's call them groups. In groups, and group A and B, it's shower time for you guys and guys, and then A and B, when you're done with showers, then D and E will go to showers and A and B will go to eat. So that's how we, but they are separated And that's why I have a heavier security presence on that side, so that the women they say they feel more safe there with that security presence inside the building. Because I had them just outside at the beginning, and I got approached by a couple of ladies that said we would love to have more security. And well, then security it is. Here it comes. And they're doing good now. So we haven't had as far as I've been told, we haven't had an incident yet. Yes, sir.
Jay, I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can, Father Strobel.
I don't know what you expected to experience by coming down here and facing this group with some sharp, critical questions, but you've been able to handle them with great discipline and kindness. But here's what I'd like to ask you. What would you expect of us now that you've been here? Is there anything you need from us to help you?
Well, first off, any of you, Father Strobel, that want to come down and visit and see what we've got going, so it's not just words, but you can see it, right? And feel it in your heart. And then give me some advice on which way we need to move. And, I'll listen, but I can't always say that it's going to go that way, because I'm not big metro. I'm Jay Survey, trying to make sure somebody's got somewhere to sleep. Right. So, I will listen from that group now, guidance and maybe staffing options. And, cause I think we've got food covered. I think we've got the medical care covered. But other than that, no, you guys, Room at the End's doing all of our linens for us. So I appreciate that, Father Stroll. Rachel's been a champ on that one for us. And Steve, right? Steven, is it Rachel and Steven? Mm-hmm. And they've been great on that. But no, just maybe some advice or that leadership to.
Well, I hope you hear that that's what we're offering. They're needing to provide the insights and wisdom that is in this group here.
Absolutely.
The second question
is
that you said you had monies to hire more staff.
Yes.
How much are you talking about?
Well, I don't know, because I just got the green light yesterday, Father Stroll, to be honest with you. And I was going to reach out to the temporary services first to see what that cost would look like, because the CARES Act is going to cover it.
You don't have a range?
I know, because I got to do it I turned in the positions, right, of what I needed, and they gave me the green light to go ahead and start researching that to get it done. But I don't think a temp agency is going to do it. I think Metro is going to have to do like a seasonal employment deal or something, but we'll figure that out. But no, I don't have a range, no, sir. Of money or people?
Money.
Yeah, I don't have the range, not yet, no, sir. I would be telling you a fib if I told you anything. I don't have that number yet.
Okay. Any other pressing questions for the chief before we move on? Okay. I'm sure we probably still have more questions and clarifications that we could ask, but we need to move on to some other business that we have. So, Chief, I as the chair of this planning council and of this group, I really want to express my appreciation for your time. I know you're overloaded, and I really do appreciate your willingness to, swing back at all our questions off the cuff, and I do. You've done a great job. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And to one more rumor that was out there about funding, that we're not funded. Well, we are. The shelter, the way it sits now, is funded or refundable. The way it sits. Could we do better? I'm sure there are always ways that we could do better. Just know that the management of the shelter, their hearts and efforts are in it. So guidance is always appreciated. So I'll end with that.
Right. Again, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Y'all have a great day. Happy Friday.
You too. Okay. There are other folks, I believe, who were on the call. Judy, do we still have someone from the Metro Health Department?
Dr. Wright, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. Dr. Wright, my name is Paula Foster. I'm the chair of the Planning Council. Would you give us just a very brief understanding of what your role has been in all of this?
Sure. I think pretty much that has been summarized well by Jay. We have been involved in helping them make sure that they met the minimum requirements as set up by the CDC. I think Jay's done a good job, given that he moved from one emergency to another, and there wasn't a lot of guidance other than get someplace up that we could work to help these things. And I think having your input to your group's input as we move forward would be very important, because this is going to be a long-term problem that we need a solution for that works well. So, but we also have done take that back, 2 testings at that shelter, group testings on individuals, because just like any other cluster of infections, we would want to test those around them. And they've done a good job of keeping people separated, meaning those that are infected, those that are under investigation, and those that are not currently infected. And because of that, they've had very little cross-contamination. So from that standpoint, they've done a great job. So.
Thank you. Are there questions for Dr. Wright? Dawn?
Yeah, so Dr. Wright, I don't know if you were able to hear some of the conversation, somewhat tense conversation that we had with Chief Surveys related to the distinctions between how individuals who have homes and individuals who do not have homes are being treated when they test positive. And so I guess one question that I have from the health department perspective is it a policy of the health department that somebody who does not have a home, who goes to the shelter seeking shelter and tests positive, must stay at that shelter and cannot leave and can't quarantine somewhere else or can't quarantine on their own? And is it the health, like, what is your perspective on the disparity in how individuals who have homes appear to be being treated versus how people who don't have homes appear to be being treated?
Well, the first thing is that if we had an individual in their own home that was repeatedly out of their home, meaning that if they broke quarantine, they would be treated the same way. If they
how would you know that? How would you know that they were doing that? I'm just telling you that if we knew that, and I'm not speaking, I know there's a difference there. I'm just telling you that if we knew that they were out of quarantine, they would be treated the same way, meaning that if they are not willing to stay in, we would move to keep them isolated, and that could result in them being potentially arrested and held to meet that quarantine time. Okay, has anybody at the health department actually looked at the rules and regs related to quarantine and whether or not jailing
we've had legal involved from the beginning on what those things are, both our department legal and downtown legal, and we would work within those, and that's, we're working with what we've been told are those.
Okay, and so my other question was related to, if somebody appears at the shelter, is tested, positive, but does not want to remain there, but says they are willing to remain in isolation and they will self-quarantine at a place. For instance, they could go and find a solitary encampment if they wanted to. They could have somebody who is a close, maybe a partner or somebody who they've have a long-term relationship with, who could assist them in getting food and shelter, or taking care of them for that. Are they required to stay at the shelter?
They are
have
not,
somewhere else they want to go?
So no, they are not required to stay at the shelter. I would be surprised that they showed up being positive and not wanting to stay there. We've had a number of the people from the mission that have left once they found out they were positive, and here's the key: if they have not been given the quarantine letter, then I understand, and I'm not legal by any means, but I understand until they're given that, understand that, and sign that, they're not. We have no basis to, because they haven't been given that information. So if they leave, we would try and track them down as if we would anybody else to try and make sure that they were quarantining correctly. That's no different than if we get a positive and we're unable to reach them by phone that is not a homeless, then we actually go out and try and find them in the community and make sure that they have received the information, that they have understanding the information, and such.
Okay.
My last question is, does the health department at this point have a recommendation for sort of long-term where we go from here? What is the best accommodations? What's the best approach to dealing with this?
Right. So we had an initial discussion yesterday with several people from HUD in trying to find a better long-term solution for the homeless population. And we have some information back, and believe that the mayor's identified, I think it's going to be Mary Falls, that they're identifying to work with probably your group and anybody else that within Metro that would be appropriate to help figure out a longer term solution.
Okay. I got two people who have questions, Freddie and Ingrid.
And I have a question.
Okay, well, let's go Freddie, Ingrid, then Charlie.
Thanks. And Dr. Wright, thanks so much for joining today. I think with you and Chief Servais here, one of the questions I have is, how can we, going forward, make sure that at least specific to the impact on people experiencing homelessness or at risk, that we make sure the Homelessness Planning Council, or at a minimum from a staffing perspective, the Homeless Impact Division within Metro, is at least involved in some of the decision making and guidance, right? I mean, we are a planning council. We've just last year released a strategic plan for this stuff. I think this task force has a lot of specific access to best practices occurring nationally and across the state, and we just want to make sure that those practices are being applied. So is there an intent to involve this group going forward?
Well, that would be my intent. I've only been really, other than looking at facility, I haven't been real involved up till now. Till within the last week, I've been asked to help look at this. So yes, I mean, any help that we can get that helps move this forward, I think is, as Jay said, we're looking for help and we're willing to listen to all sorts of answers. And then
you've got people willing to help with the relevant experience and background.
I'm glad, because I didn't know until yesterday there was a planning council.
Yeah, so this has been one of the issues that we're just trying to make sure that there is some awareness that people have been working on, not just governance, but actually working with this community for a long time. One specific question I have about implementation is, we know Metro Health has made a decision to voluntarily share COVID-19 positive information with law enforcement. I don't know if there's a plan to update that policy. I think for this community in particular, location of encampments, all sorts of things about privacy and the feeling of personal security. I mean, this is an extremely vulnerable population. Is Metro Health going to update that policy to suspend that practice? Is that something we're anticipating?
The answer is, I know that it's being reviewed, and the intent was never to directly share it with police. It is, however, was to share it with the Emergency Communications Center, so that
Chief Anderson believes it is being shared directly with him. So
I don't disagree with that. I think it is, or was initially. I think that that's part of the discussion. Is it needs to be taken out of the police's hands directly. The other thing is that there needs to be very specific short-term availability, and it needs to be maybe not names so much as sites. Just if the first responders have to and I'm thinking more fire and rescue because somebody's very sick. I want them, not that they're not going to try and be there as quickly as they can, but I want them to be there prepared because some of these COVID patients very quickly become very sick, where they walk, the fire may walk in the door, they're short of breath, they within a minute, within a short period of time, they're on oxygen. By the time they're in the hospital, they're having to be intubated. So it's can be a very quick thing. But I also want to make sure that they're prepared, meaning that they're protected going in so that they aren't at risk. And we don't want to lose a lot of our first responders for a period of time because they themselves have been exposed or infected.
No,
So,
and there's
and so yes, I think that's a very good concern, and I think that there is a discussion going. I am not involved in that directly, but I will continue to push that. That's what we would see.
great. Thanks.
Okay, Ingrid.
Yeah, I have a question about addiction health and addiction care, and wondering what happens with our friends who, we know, I mean, I would assume that most of them are not going to go into a shelter because they can't, they can't function. They'll go into detox. And I do know that detox is especially from alcohol, is a very dangerous thing. So what is being done in terms of addiction care in shelters for people who have needs? Is there access to those things? Or what's being provided in terms of detox care for them if they do need to stay? Are they being offered detox care? Are they being offered beer if that's what they need? I mean, I know that, might be ridiculous, but it's not. It's a healthcare issue. So, and there are plenty of wet shelters across the country so that people can stay safe physically, I mean, I know, contribute to their addiction care. I don't know how to say that necessarily, but what is the process for that?
As I said, I'm not sure. Jay may be able to better answer that. I don't know that we have had the main majority of what I had seen come in had come in from the mission. So, and I've only been over there to examine the place before it's set up, and then I worked with the 2 testing groups that were over there. So I'm not sure about that day-to-day operation. I do know that they've involved mental health co-op. I know that they've got the ability to do, when we were talking earlier about care, that they can do some telemedicine even if they need to. But I don't know, and Jay could maybe speak to that.
Hey, Ingrid, the 2-hour pass or the 3-hour pass, that's where they'll go handle their business. And that's what I'm saying on that one. I can't bring beer into a metro facility, right? So they handle their business. But on the front end, the mission and I have worked it out to where they try not to give us any of their known addiction folks unless they're positive at that point, right? And that's where they have to be quarantined. So on the front end, the mission tries to keep their knowns there so that they can keep that care for them, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Ingrid?
That is helpful to know, but I also would just push back. And again, I know you don't make the rules, but I would want to push back and say, why no alcohol in metro buildings? Like, we all know that there's alcohol in metro buildings on the reg. I mean, we sell alcohol in metro buildings. We consume alcohol in metro buildings. Like, I'm just wondering what the difference is. Again,
well, because alcohol would turn into other things, right? Like, you heard my pushback then. If I let beer in, then what about a hit of meth? What about cocaine? What about all that I can't legally do, right? So that's the trick. That's the trick. That's the magic that happens that you guys haven't got to see. Is that's the relationship I have with the mission, with Glenn and Norm, is that they don't send me their high level cases unless they're positive, right? So they're being taken care of. But so that 2-hour pass, I know they're handling business. Hey, we don't kick them out for being drunk if they, well, we can't prove they're drunk, but, or ETOH is what we call it, but we bring them back in. So we don't deny them the stay either if they go out and have them a few beers to handle their addiction.
I have a situation from my past at the Room in the Inn where a phone call is made to us from the health department that says that there's a person that's escaped from some other city and is in the area, and we're looking to pick him up because he has chronic TB. And the TB makes the situation of his being with us dangerous in terms of our health. And so suddenly we find the person in our system. We call health department, and they show up with 5 or 6 people in moon suits. It looks like they're all in white, and that they take and escort the fellow out because that's a criminal issue. Is there any similarity in the type of situations of health that we're talking about here? Did you hear me?
Go ahead, Jay. Jay, you're muted.
So yeah, and that's a concern there. That's why we try to keep people within the shelter on the sick side when they're confirmed positive for that reason, because of that part of it. Charlie, is that gets ugly quick. That's what COVID is. It's the same thing. It's that contagious as TB is from a medical standpoint. So I hear the dilemma, and I wish I had a clear resolution for you on this call right now, but I don't, except for we highly encourage them to stay for that reason. Because if they do go back to an encampment, the likelihood, and Gil, you could speak on that from encampments, like, of them spreading from the studies that have happened is tremendous, because they're around more people for more than 10 minutes. So 10 minutes is this magic window of exposure time where it increases, it just doubles if you're there for more than 10 minutes. And even if you're in with 6 to 8 feet, right? So that's why we, I don't make the law. I know that that's a issue there, Charlie. So that would be the case if we had to go somewhere else, would be a full level, not level A, but a level B, fully encapsulated suit to go take care of someone. And that's not fun for anybody.
And when we come into the facility, we come in with just our mask and scrubs or whatever on. We don't come in with full gear. Now, before we do the testing, where we're going to spend some very close time, then we do put on gear to do the testing. But to come into the facility already fully geared up, no, we wouldn't do that. We don't need to do that level until we're very close and intimate. But once we start doing that testing, we know from other cities and countries that healthcare workers that are doing this testing have a higher rate of infection and a higher rate, because of that immense exposure, to being sick and even potentially dying. So we're going to put that on, but we try and do it, in an area where we're just going to do the testing. Once the testing's over, it's all gone, and we're back into just our regular mask, just like the people that are there all the time.
It really creates a dilemma.
Yeah. So we try not to give that hard presence, Charlie, ever. Right. So just mask and people, right, protecting themselves, mask and gloves. If there are known COVID positive patients that's severely sick enough to force a transport, then we do have to gown and goggles and get dressed up a little bit more. But, that's in a more isolated group. But it is scary for people to see that. I would agree with you on that.
Okay. I have questions from Elena.
Yes, thank you. Quickly, we had mentioned encampments. My question is, if someone tests positive in an encampment, are they forced to go to the shelter, or can they isolate and quarantine at that encampment? And then how is continuity of care continued in that encampment and delivered?
I'm not sure if I would know if they're in encampment. It would depend upon where where they were tested, whether we had contact information for them. If they, for instance, if they went through an assessment center and you can walk up to one of those to be tested, they would be told that they should isolate themselves until they get the results. If it would come back positive, our tracing or investigation team would reach out to them. Sometimes we don't have phone numbers. Sometimes we don't have addresses. Sometimes we have the wrong addresses and phone numbers. It can be, but we would try and reach out to them. And if they tell us that, and we would go through that, and we would encourage them to self-isolate or quarantine if they're positive. And so I don't know if they've even had to handle one of those that I'm aware of.
I got you on that one, Gil. I got you. So Salvation Army is handling the care of the encampments outside of the facility right now. Is it Elena? I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. Sorry, your picture's real small. So okay, Elena. So Salvation Army is doing that, and then I think Brian Hale with Neighborhood Health is doing a lot of the medical care there. And if Gil and team are called out to test a mass test in an encampment, then they're encouraged to come to the shelter if they pop hot, but they're not forced to go to the shelter. I know that. So once they're in an encampment, it's not like we go get them and bring them to the shelter, but they're offered the shelter if they want a refuge to isolate in from an encampment. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Ingrid, do you have another question? No. Other questions for Dr. Wright?
Does the light in here make my head real shiny? Because I feel like it's really, really shiny, like extra shiny today. It's weird to look at yourself on camera. That's crazy. All right, sorry. I had to break free for a minute.
That's okay.
I actually do have another question. Sorry.
Okay.
Or just something that might be helpful information. So outreach workers are going out into encampments still all the time, constantly, right? And so it seems like that would be a really good, and it's not necessarily from Salvation Army, which again, another breakdown in communication, like why the governor would tell Salvation Army to be in charge of all outreach for the entire city or state when Nashville has its own outreach community. We don't need that. So there has been outreach workers going out into encampments, making sure that people have food now that soup shelters are shut down, and et cetera, and have been checking on people's health. So there is a group of folks who in Nashville do this every day anyway, who have relationships with people in encampments, who are caring for folks, who would actually be willing to care for folks in hotels if they were told, if outreach workers were told, hey, all your people are going to this hotel, they would be like, hallelujah, praise the Lord, we can go take care of them in a hotel instead of on the streets, right? But just so that you know, that is a resource, and other health teams that are going out into these encampments, because we're not just going to not let our folks be cared for. So like when other things fall through the cracks, we're out there doing, making sure folks are being checked on, making sure they have food, making sure that their health is okay. So if and I know there's a lot of coordination with Brian and us in those outreach teams. Just letting you know that, so that folks are aware that there are people touching base with folks in encampments, and whether those be solitary encampments where people are isolating because they are concerned about their health care. There are plenty of people that are isolating and, living in one encampment, like one person in an encampment. Certainly there are others that have more people, and that is a concern to me, right? But there are definitely, just so everyone knows, there is communication happening with people that we care for in the community that are not a part of the shelter, or that are not comfortable coming in either to the health department or to the shelter to say, like, we need to be tested because they're afraid. And for whatever reason that is, whether it's a good reason or not a good reason, it doesn't matter if they're not coming in, right? So just so you know, those are options to reach out to more folks.
Right.
No.
Yeah, this is yeah, and see, this group, we're not adversaries. We're all on the same team, just on trying to reach a common goal. Just been on different sides of the field for a minute, so we need to get together and make this happen. And Charlie and the group, y'all asked me what my biggest need was, and it is staffing. But you know, it's my harder cases. If we could get a policy, not a policy, but a procedure in place to help me with my harder cases, I would sleep a little better at night. Hard cases are the 77-year-old man in a wheelchair, right? That can't go to the restroom without aid, or he's not hospitalized. He's not within the hospital's gotten rid of him, right? They call me. I go get him
because he suffers from dementia.
He doesn't meet the qualifications to stay at the hospital, but yet he needs a little bit of higher level of care. And if you could provide me the rooms and the staffing to help me with that, then I would much rather that gentleman have, or that woman have, their privacy, and care that they need. So we can't, we're providing that. It's just in an open area. They're just harder cases. So
let's say,
so Jay, hold on, Charlie, hold on a second. Here's so I think Jay, specifically for cases like that, Ingrid has some really good resource for you, so you should touch base with her directly offline from here.
Got it.
So
let me add 3 other populations that we haven't talked about: families with children, mental illness issues, and felonies. We've got that mixed into everything, it seems, or where are they?
Yeah, what do you have any issues with families needing shelter, or is this strictly from?
I have luckily not. Well, no, just the one mom that popped hot, and she had 2 children. One of them was full-time wheelchair bound, but public health had Madeline McCormick had caseworkers at the hospitals help me find somewhere for her to go. But it was hell. I'm sorry to use that word on this forum, but that was, trying to get that done was absurd. Almost hurt my feelings, right? So if I have those resources, I'll use them. So I'm not scared. I need the resources to do it. I need to be able to staff it, because I can't put somebody in a room and just leave them alone. I need somebody to go by and check on them. I need somebody to feed them. I need somebody to make sure that their needs are being met, right? The bills are being paid and all that. So I'm on y'all's team. I just try to figure out how to get her done.
Okay, we very much appreciate that. Let me couple things I want to make sure happens before we have to move on. Dawn, I know that you are going to have to leave fairly soon, I think, to make your appointment at the fairgrounds, because I know that you're going to go out and see for yourself what those things look like. This group is scheduled to meet again on Tuesday, and Dawn, I would ask that after your visit to the fairgrounds. Wendell, are you going to?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say. I'm gonna have to borrow out also.
Okay. So here's what I'd like for the 2 of you to do for me, please. We're not going to meet between now and the next time we meet to finalize what we're doing for the planning council. So if the 2 of you would, after your tour today, jot down your thoughts and impressions in an email and send that to Judy, then Judy can send that out to all of us. Remember, sunshine meeting rules, those things. We can't communicate directly with each other that way, but send your impressions of what you see today and your thoughts or questions to Judy, and Judy will disseminate that to all of us so that we all have that information before next Tuesday. So I wanted to make sure I said that before. You 2 had to sign off.
I'm happy to do that.
No problem.
So we only have a little bit of time left on this call. So I want to ask, we've gotten a lot of information today, a lot of questions that we had no way of getting answers to. We've gotten some answers. We may like those answers, we may not like those answers, but we've gotten some answers to some of the questions that we've had, and I really appreciate the time from Dr. Wright and Chief service to answer those for us and be here with us. What I would like to do again going forward is a couple of things, given that we're out of time at this point. Dawn, would you be willing to take that document that was sent out for me in the letter form and do some tweaking on it because I liked your suggestions. I like what your perspective, and I think everyone else did too. Would you take a stab at rearranging that and seeing what you can do with it to make it more along the lines of what we talked about?
I'd be
That'd be
happy to. I was actually going to suggest that I'd be willing to do that. And to go back to responding just really in 30 seconds to Ingrid's response, I mean, what she points out is right. I can really only speak for myself. And I think that that was a wake-up call for me. And what that says to me is there's at least one person on the planning council, who bears some responsibility. And I think acknowledging that in a letter that we write to say, we bear some responsibility in not being proactively in reaching out to the mayor's office saying, hey, we know there's got to be things happening and we should be at that table. So I think acknowledging that and just adding that in. So I'd be happy to do that, and I'll get that circulated. I'll send that back to Judy.
Send it back to Judy.
And I'm done.
That'd be great. And if we're talking about an op-ed, there's a word count you have to pay attention to. I think it's like 550. So just FYI on that.
550 to 600 generally, right?
Yeah. So they work within that, and we'll see.
Sometimes he's really generous if the letter is really awesome and he thinks it needs to get across. So.
So so thank you, Dawn and Wendell, for those two things. The last thing that I'm going to ask of each of you is that I wanted today to make sure that we came away from this meeting with some sense of recommendations that we would like to put forward. It's one thing to have concerns and questions and be upset that we haven't been involved in the process so far. It's quite another to just say that we need to come up with what do we think we can offer to the city moving forward and how can we make that happen. I'm not looking for detailed logistical implementation ideas around our recommendations. I'm simply looking for recommendations. If recommendations are thought to be something that could be utilized, then we can begin to work on a more detailed implementation plan for those recommendations. But right now, I would like for each member of this task force to take the information that we have compiled, that we've been sent from Elena and Judy, and all of the guidelines that we've seen, best practice guidelines. I would like for each of you to send in some recommendations that you would like to see us put forth. Send those to Judy. She'll compile those and send them back out to all of us so that when we meet next Tuesday, we will focus very clearly on how to pare those recommendations down into what we think is the most important thing to offer right now. Again, I don't want to overload anyone with 50 recommendations. I want them to be clear and concise, and I'm sure that we're going to all send in some of the same ones. Judy can pare those down into a list of all the recommendations that we send in, and next meeting we're gonna pare those down into a priority list of recommendations that we can submit to the mayor's office, and request that we also be part of any further planning process, so that we can give our input and our expertise to those recommendations as well. Does that sound feasible and viable and what we need to do right now? I'm getting a lot of shaking of heads.
Yes.
So, okay.
I would only want to add that we reflect on what Jay and the doctor said today. We heard a lot of information. What is it that's compelling us to respond to help? Because he in a sense asked for our help.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what I want us to think about in terms of making more formal recommendations to the administration.
And there's past, present, and future. I think we need to concentrate on the present and the future.
I agree.
Emphasize the past. I don't think.
I would agree. My only caveat with that is that this is the second time in the last 6 months that this council has not had input into specific issues involving homelessness and the city's response system. And that's a pattern. So while you're right, Charlie, I want to focus on now and moving forward. It needs to be said that
I think
that
John,
this administration continues to overlook us. And let me just, and I said this in the letter that I wrote, the draft, and we can take it out before we send it any further, and that's fine. But Mayor Cooper was a council member at large who voted for creating this council. He knows we exist. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So let's take that and if everyone can send Judy those recommendations, we can compile those and be ready to pare them down into some specific things that we want to say at our next meeting on Tuesday. And we move from there. Judy, would you please actually also send that out to folks who had to drop off on this call? I know Freddie and Mark had to drop off. So if you'll make sure they know that we need them to send in their recommendations.
Yes, and just logistics on recommendations. Think bullet points and prioritize. Think 3 to 5. If you can't turn in 20, nobody's going to read 20. So what are the top 3 to 5? That's my recommendation, and the deadline is Sunday evening.
Actually, I would like the deadline to be a little faster than that. If you guys can get that done by tomorrow afternoon, Judy would be happy to have a little more time. And I know that means we're going to work a little bit on the weekends, but that's kind of what we do in times like this. So I would appreciate a faster turnaround on those if we can.
Paula,
Yeah.
you said we were meeting Tuesday.
Yes,
That's
Tuesday
what I
morning.
heard. Jay said he's going to a meeting on Tuesday. Do they happen to be the same meeting? Do you know?
Not the same meeting, Charlie. And again, and I know hopefully this will change, but no one from this group from the Planning Council has been invited to attend any meeting of the mayor's office or task force or anything at this point. I hope that will change, but so far we've not been invited to the table. And again, that's part of our point is we have expertise that we want to give, that we're willing to give, that hopefully will be helpful in moving forward. We just need somewhere to provide that input. So, okay. And with that, I think I will entertain a motion to adjourn for today.
I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn, also just stating for the record how appreciative I am for our Homeless Impact Division team and our staff, particularly Abigail and Judith. And mostly, I think that it has got to feel overwhelming when the city that you work for doesn't listen to you when you're trying to do your job. And so I just want to say thank you to the two of you, because that is incredibly frustrating, and yet you are persevering through this. And so I thank you for that. And with that, I would like to propose a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Elena. All in favor, please raise your collective hands. And we will adjourn until Tuesday morning. I thank you all very much for your thoughtful questions and everything. Dawn, I'm looking forward to your and Wendell's impressions from the fairgrounds today. And thank you for going. All right. Bye, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.